The optional auxiliary power unit installed in the rear equipment bay in the aft fuselage is used on ground only for air conditioning, electrical power and engine starting. Intake air is drawn through this screened duct, and exhaust gases are discharged upwards at the aft end of the titanium tail cone. Basically, the APU is a gas turbine engine driving a DC starter generator, providing bleed air to the air conditioning packs and 28-volt DC electrical power to the right main feeder bus. It has its own fuel system and fire detection and extinguishing system. APU starting and other operations are controlled by its own APU FADEC, Full Authority Digital Electronic Controller. As well as monitoring all parameters of the APU, the FADEC interfaces with other aircraft systems via a digital bus. On the overhead panel is the APU control panel and the APU section of the fire protection panel. Load on the APU generator can be monitored on the electrical page of an MFD, and there's an APU caution light that comes on when the APU is shut down automatically due to a malfunction. To perform an APU start, you need either DC external power or battery power. Select the power switch light on the APU control panel to arm the starting circuits. Press the APU power switch light. The APU FADEC opens the APU fuel valve, and fuel flows from the left collector tank along the aircraft dorsal fin, boosted by a gravity-fed fuel pump, to an APU fuel enclosure. Fuel goes initially to 2 igniters. On the APU fire panel, the APU fuel valve open and closed lights confirm the fuel valve position. Now you can start the APU. Touch the Start switch light. The APU starts to spool up. The starter segment illuminates. As the APU accelerates through 50% RPM, the FADEC switches off the starter and its light goes out. At about 70% RPM, fuel is released to the remaining fuel nozzles, and at about 85% RPM, the FADEC switches off ignition. But there is no gauge for APU RPM, so you won't see any indications. Shortly after, the APU is configured for automatic speed governing. The APU power run segment comes on, indicating that the APU is fully up to speed. And the warn segment warns that the APU generator is not supplying power. With the APU running, it is ready to deliver bleed air and electrical power. Touch the bleed air switch light. The APU FADEC opens the APU bleed valve, supplying APU bleed through the firewall to the air conditioning packs of the environmental control system and to the aft safety outflow valve of the cabin pressure control system. But the APU does not supply bleed air for de-icing. Check valves prevent APU bleed from entering the engines and engine bleed from entering the APU. As an extra backup, if one or both bleed selector switches are on, the FADEC closes the APU bleed valve. With the APU running, its generator control unit switches from starter to generator. To connect electrical power from the APU to other aircraft systems, press the Gen switch light. Touch the light. The generator is supplying 28-volt DC power to the right main feeder bus. In generator mode, the APU can power all of the DC system, recharge all 3 batteries, and assist main engine starting, but it cannot power the AC variable frequency system. Load on the APU generator can be monitored on the electrical page of the MFD, If an APU fire is detected, the fire light and APU fuel valve closed light come on, the check fire detection warning flashes, the APU is automatically shut down, triggering the APU caution and the fail segment on the APU control panel, and the APU bottle is armed. It will be automatically discharged after 7 seconds. After discharging, the APU cannot be restarted until the bottle has been replaced. The APU fire detection and protection system is covered in more detail in the fire module. The APU FADEC will automatically shut down the APU if there are faults, triggering the APU caution to get your attention. Typical reasons are low oil pressure, high exhaust gas temperature, notice the generator overheat segment, and turbine under or overspeed. Power to the APU is cut off, generator power stops, and the APU bleed valve is closed. Make sure that the switch light positions are off. The APU FADEC also shuts down the APU if you take off with the APU on. Finally, if you get one of these caution lights indicating air conditioning hot problems on ground, try selecting the APU bleed off according to checklist.